I used to think I understood patterns, thought marriage worked the same way as the systems I handled every day. But even the cleanest structure can hide the hairline fractures until one day they start whispering through the walls. My name is Trevor Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and for the past decade I've made a living inside the quiet, unglamorous corners of cybersecurity, tech support, network audits, vulnerability analysis. It's not the kind of work that impresses anyone at parties, but it's work that makes sense to me. Systems don't lie. Logs don't soften the truth. Everything has a root cause, and if you dig long enough with the right tools, you'll find it. Maybe that's why I liked my life as much as I did. Denver gave me enough noise to feel alive and enough quiet to keep my head clear. My days were structured. Wake up at 6, gym, black coffee, logged into work by 8. Troubleshooting sessions, breach simulations, half-broken servers begging for mercy, then home by 5:30. I lived inside patterns. I trusted them. Hannah fit into that structure naturally. She was a freelance graphic designer, artistic, social, always moving toward whatever caught her eye. I'm not the extroverted type, but I never needed her to be a mirror. I liked that she carried a different energy into the room. She talked fast, laughed loud, and lit up spaces I would have walked through quietly. We balanced each other without trying, the way some couples just do. Our marriage was built on small habits that made life feel solid. Quiet dinners after long days, Netflix shows we half-watched while she sketched ideas on her tablet, weekend drives into the mountains to hike or just breathe cleaner air. I'd make breakfast on Saturdays. She'd make coffee. She took the passenger seat. I took the wheel. None of it felt remarkable, but it was steady. Steady enough. Hannah's best friend, Catherine Brooks, blended into that rhythm too. Catherine was outgoing, bold, the type who could turn a grocery store trip into a social event. She and Hannah had been inseparable long before I came along, and I respected that. I never tried to wedge myself into their space. I liked seeing Hannah have connections that weren't tied to me. Some men get insecure about that. I never did. Independence wasn't a threat. It was part of why I loved her. For years, everything worked. No raised voices, no tension. No cold shoulders waiting behind closed doors. Just the kind of life you build intentionally, brick by brick, until it feels like something you can rely on. Maybe that was the problem. I relied on it so completely I didn't see the shift when it started. Came slowly, not loud, not dramatic, more like a quiet draft slipping through a door that had always been shut. First, it was nothing, something small, a moment where she seemed distracted. A pause before answering a question. A weekend where she stayed at Catherine's a little longer than usual. I brushed it off. Everyone has off days, burnout days, long days. Hannah's work relied on creativity. Creativity doesn't show up on a schedule. I didn't think much of it. Not then. Looking back, the signs were there. Tiny anomalies, irregularities in the system. The kind you don't see until they start stacking against each other, demanding to be acknowledged. But at that point, my life still felt quiet, solid, predictable, the kind of life a man trusts without question. And trust, real trust, can make you blind right up until the moment it doesn't. Most men can feel when their home stops choosing them, even if they don't say it out loud. And once that feeling shows up, it never really leaves. Hannah's nights away started quietly, almost politely, like they didn't want to cause trouble. The first one made sense. Catherine was dealing with a breakup and wanted company. Fine. The second week, it happened twice. She shrugged and blamed deadlines, creative pressure, needing a change of scenery. By the third week, she was packing a small overnight bag almost every other night, kissing me on the cheek, and telling me she'd probably be back tomorrow morning. Probably. That word never used to exist between us. I'm a man who works in patterns. I spend hours staring at data streams, trying to figure out where an intrusion started, where a system faltered, what line of code caused a crash. And no matter how much I tried to tell myself her behavior was harmless, just stress, just burnout, just life, I could feel a pattern forming. Not a dramatic one. Not some explosive shift that smacks you in the face. This was subtler. A mood, a tone, a silence where there used to be ease. When she came home from these Catherine nights, she moved differently. I talked less, smiled like it took effort. She'd walk past me on the way to the shower and not touch me. No hand on my shoulder, no brush against my arm, nothing. A small thing, maybe, but small things add up. She stopped asking about my day, stopped ranting about clients, stopped leaving her sketchbooks on the couch. It felt like someone had taken our marriage, drained the color from it, and handed it back in grayscale. I tried to rationalize everything the way any reasonable man would. Creative burnout hits hard. Freelancers burn odd hours. Friendships matter. People need space. Stress screws with intimacy. I told myself every version of that story because I wanted to believe her, because I wanted to believe us. But there was something else too, a shutdown feeling, like I was being powered down one switch at a time. Nights on the couch felt longer. The house felt colder. I'd watch the clock hit midnight, then 1, then 2, and she still wouldn't be home. She'd walk in at dawn, claiming she lost track of time. And I'd nod like a man trying to convince himself he wasn't being excluded from his own life. The hardest part wasn't the distance. It was sudden. The way affection didn't fade, it vanished. The way conversations weren't quieter, they were gone. It felt like someone had rewritten her operating system overnight and left me running outdated software. I remember one night sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee that had already gone cold, staring at her empty chair across from me. It hit me that I couldn't remember the last time she'd reached for my hand without me initiating it. Couldn't remember the last time she laughed around me the way she used to. Couldn't remember the last time she chose me when she had any other option. It's strange how quickly a man can feel obsolete. I didn't want to be paranoid. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous husband digging for meaning in the shadows. So I kept giving her the benefit of every doubt. I kept trusting her words instead of trusting my instincts. But instincts don't shut up. Not when you're trained to see vulnerabilities. Not when you've spent years reading systems for hidden faults. And not when the person you love keeps walking out the door without looking back. By the end of that month, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what yet, but I knew. A routine doesn't glitch without a cause. And Hannah was glitching everywhere. A lie only works if everyone involved keeps the story straight. That night, Hannah's story finally broke. The night it happened was quiet, so quiet it felt intentional. I was sitting in the living room, laptop open but untouched, trying to distract myself with work I couldn't focus on. Hannah was in the same room, curled up on the far end of the couch, scrolling her phone with the kind of absorbed expression she used to save for her design projects. At 8:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. She read whatever came through, locked the screen, and typed something quickly. Then she said, without looking at me, "I'm staying at Catherine's tonight." Just like that. Casual. Practiced. Automatic. But something about the tone, the flatness, the mechanical distance hit me wrong. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just wrong. Like a pressure drop in the room. She stood, grabbed her overnight bag from the coat rack, already packed, and walked down the hall toward the bedroom. I sat there, listening to drawers open and close, listening to her move around a house that suddenly didn't feel like mine. For a few seconds, I told myself to let it go, to stay quiet, to be understanding, to trust her, again. But there's a difference between trust and denial. And that night, denial finally ran out of excuses. I didn't follow her. I didn't ask her anything. I didn't confront her. Instead, I picked up my phone, stepped into the kitchen, and called Catherine directly. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Trevor," she said, sounding normal, too normal. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I replied, "just checking in. Is Hannah with you tonight?" There was no pause, no hesitation, no shuffling or rustling or whispering, just confusion. "What? No, I haven't seen her in, I don't know, a couple weeks." "Why?" I felt something inside me go very still. Don't panic. Not a shock. Just a hard, cold stillness. The kind a man feels when the truth walks into the room and locks the door behind it. "Okay," I said quietly. "Thanks." "Wait. Trevor, is something wrong?" But I'd already hung up. The silence in the kitchen felt different now. Heavy. Final. I set the phone down on the counter and just stood there, hands braced, breathing slowly. My chest felt numb, like someone had hollowed it out with precision tools. Not a stab. Not a blow. More like a firewall collapsing after too many unpatched breaches. Quiet, inevitable, exposing everything it was supposed to protect. I walked back into the living room. Hannah was zipping her bag. She didn't look up. If I had asked her then, "Where are you really going?" she would have lied. Smoothly, easily. She'd been practicing for a while. If I had confronted her then, she would have cried or deflected or blamed stress. She had an arsenal of rehearsed explanations, and I was done listening to them. So I said nothing. I watched her walk to the door. She told me she loved me, softly, the way people do when they're performing. Then she stepped out, closing the door gently behind her, as if being quiet made it better. I stood there for a long time, staring at that door. There are moments in a man's life that brand themselves into memory with surgical clarity. This was one of them, the exact second when the truth wasn't a suspicion, or a worry, or a gut feeling. It was a fact. Hannah wasn't at Catherine's. Hadn't been. And every night she spent working, relaxing, unwinding, every one of them had been a lie. I didn't yell, didn't pace, didn't break anything. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the breaking. I sat down on the couch, stared at the blank TV screen, and exhaled slowly. My marriage, our routines, our rituals, our trust. Left the house with her and didn't bother looking back. Every man remembers the moment he stops being blind. That night was mine. Some truths don't need confrontation, they just need a timestamp and a location. And that night, both were waiting for me behind a glowing blue on a map. I waited until the house settled into its empty silence. Her car was gone. Her last, "I'm at Catherine's" text still sat on my screen like a joke that hadn't landed. I opened my laptop. We'd activated Google Maps location sharing a few years back during a road trip and never bothered disabling it. The sync was dormant, but still functional. I clicked into the dashboard, signed in, and waited for the map to load. Then it appeared. A single blue dot labeled Hannah's phone. Not at Catherine's condo. Not anywhere near it. Instead, it sat across the city at an address I didn't recognize. A residential complex I had no reason to know. I stared at it for a long moment. No anger. No disbelief. Just confirmation. Systems don't lie. People do. I grabbed my keys, put on my jacket, and walked out into the Denver night. The air was cold enough to numb the edge of whatever I wasn't ready to feel. I drove without music, without noise. Just the hum of the engine and the quiet pressure behind my ribs. The streets blurred into a grid of lights and empty intersections. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't hesitating. I was following a line of data to its endpoint, the way I'd done 1,000 times on the job. By the time I turned into the neighborhood, the map showed I was 100 yards out. The address matched a modern apartment complex. Steel, glass, 2 new landscaping, the kind of place young professionals rented for the amenities. I parked across the street, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. Her blue dot was still inside the building. Unmoving. I leaned back and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. I didn't get restless. I didn't rethink anything. I just watched the building like a man waiting for a process to finish running. Just after midnight, the front door opened, and 2 figures stepped out. I knew her silhouette instantly. Hannah walked with a certain looseness in her hips, a familiar sway. She wasn't wearing the clothes she'd left the house in. These were casual, comfortable, lived in. Clothes you wear around someone familiar. The man beside her was faced away from me, but the build was unmistakable. I felt the recognition before I fully processed it. Blake Anderson, old coworker, a guy she always claimed framed design ideas better than anyone. Just a friend. Someone who gets the creative world. I'd never thought twice about him. They talked quietly as they walked toward the parking lot. He said something that made her laugh, soft, intimate, like the version of her I hadn't heard in months. Then he pulled her in. Not a quick kiss. Not a careless one. A slow, deliberate kiss that erased whatever excuses she'd been feeding me for weeks. The world didn't explode. It didn't even tilt. It just sharpened. Like everything finally came into focus after living blurry for too long. I raised my phone, steady and controlled, and took the photos. 1, 2, 3. Evidence. Proof. Certainty. She rested her head on his chest afterward, and he held her like a man who thought she belonged there. I watched for another full minute, letting the truth settle. Not like a wound, but like a verdict. Then I put the car in drive, turned around, and headed home. No yelling, no calling, no confrontation. I had what I came for. Technology doesn't lie. People do. A liar can talk around suspicion, but no one talks around a photograph. Hannah walked into the house around 9:15 the next morning, keys jingling like it was any other day. I was sitting at the dining table, coffee in hand, the printed photos laid out in a clean line in front of me. She froze the moment she saw them. Her bag slipped off her shoulder and hit the floor. Color drained from her face so fast it looked like something physical had been pulled out of her. Trevor. What is this? Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She recognized Blake's face in the photos before her eyes even finished tracking across the table. Hannah, I said quietly. I called Catherine last night. That hit her harder than the pictures did. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, like she was trying to find an entry point into a story that had already collapsed. Wait, Trevor, no, listen, it wasn't. Last night was. It was complicated. I drank too much. I was overwhelmed. It wasn't what it looked like. I swear. I kept my voice level. You weren't at Catherine's. You haven't been for a while. I know where you were. I know who you were with. And I know how long you've been lying. Her breathing sped up. Tears hit instantly. Panic tears, not remorseful ones. She stepped toward me, hands shaking like she could physically rearrange the truth if she touched it. Please, Trevor, just talk to me. We can fix this. I love you. I was confused. I was stressed. Blake was he was a mistake. I held up a hand. She stopped mid-sentence. Your things are packed, I said. My lawyer has already been contacted. This marriage is over. The silence that followed felt thick enough to chew through. Hannah collapsed into a chair across from me like her legs forgot how to work. Trevor, no. Please don't do this. We can work through it. We can go to counseling. She was spiraling, grabbing at anything that sounded like hope. I didn't move. You made your choices, I said. All I'm doing is acknowledging them. Her tears got louder. Her excuses got stranger. Alcohol, loneliness, creative burnout, emotional confusion, some half-formed story about how Blake misunderstood the situation. None of it mattered. There's a moment in every betrayed man's story where the emotional switch flips off. Mine flipped last night in a dark parking lot. She reached for my hand across the table. I pulled mine back. Her face crumpled, but I didn't soften. Not once. I'm done, Hannah, I said. You don't get to break something and then act surprised it's broken. She cried harder, begged, promised things that should have come months earlier. I stood, picked up my keys, and walked past her without looking back. Her voice followed me out the door, but it didn't mean a thing. Some endings don't need closure. They just need the truth. Once you know someone has lied to you, their story stops matching. After that, all that matters is the proof. The weeks that followed moved with a cold, clean precision. Not because I wasn't hurting, hurt was there, humming under the surface like a low-voltage current, but because the process itself demanded order. And order is what I knew. My lawyer, Daniel, was a calm, heavy-voiced man who'd seen enough marriages split to recognize when one was already over. When I slid the folder across the table, the photos, the timestamps, the location history, the printed transcript of my call with Catherine, he sifted through it like a mechanic checking a well-prepared engine. Trevor, he said, looking up, this is airtight. Colorado's laws don't ignore infidelity. Proof matters. Documentation matters. And I had both. The divorce filings went out within 48 hours. Hannah received them through a courier. She called me the same afternoon. I didn't answer. Over the next few days, her messages piled up, wall after wall of shifting tones. 1 minute apologies. The next minute rationalizations. Then anger. Then bargaining. Then rewriting the history of our entire marriage, as if she could modify the past to soften the present. None of it landed. I kept the communication minimal, documented, and on the record. Anything emotional went ignored. Anything logistical went through the lawyer. Catherine reached out too. Her message was long, full of guilt and explanations I didn't need. She admitted Hannah hadn't stayed with her in months. Apologized for not telling me. Said she felt terrible. I archived the message for legal purposes and never responded. The nights were the hardest. Not because I missed Hannah, but because the house echoed differently. Quiet used to feel peaceful. Now it felt like an aftermath. I'd sit on the couch with the TV off, the windows dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the whole place. You don't realize how much of your life is built around someone's presence until their absence rearranges the architecture. Work became a refuge. Digging into corrupted files and tracing digital breaches gave my mind something to hold on to. There was no betrayal in the data, just errors, causes, solutions. Triage I understood. Some evenings, I'd come home exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally scraped out. I'd make dinner, stare at the plate, and eat out of obligation instead of appetite. Granular grief, slow and quiet, settling like dust. But beneath all that, beneath the fatigue, the hollowed-out feeling was clarity. I hadn't failed Hannah. I hadn't neglected her. I hadn't abandoned anything. She had. Every betrayal starts with a choice. Every consequence follows one. When the settlement meetings arrived, she tried everything. She cried. She whispered my name like it was a lifeline. She asked if I was really ready to throw away everything we built. She said Blake meant nothing. She said she didn't know why she did it. She said she loved me. She said she was scared. I sat across from her with my lawyer beside me, and I didn't return a single emotional volley. Her fear wasn't mine to fix anymore. The process moved quickly, faster than she expected. The evidence cut through every attempt to delay or complicate. At the final meeting, she held the pen for a full minute before signing her name, tears hitting the paper faster than the ink dried. I didn't look away. I didn't soften. I didn't hate her. Hate takes energy. I was done. When it was over, I walked out of the building into a cold Denver wind. The sky was gray. The air smelled like winter. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the cold cut through the leftover noise in my head. Documentation had carried me through the wreckage. Now I just had to carry myself. And for the first time since everything broke, I realized I could. Every man reaches a point where he stops looking backward. Mine came slowly, one small decision at a time. Selling the house felt less like losing something and more like clearing a battlefield. It was too big for me now, too many rooms, too many ghosts of routines that no longer belonged to me. My real estate agent asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. Some spaces aren't worth keeping clean. I moved into a smaller apartment downtown. Clean lines, simple layout, nothing unnecessary. A place that didn't carry anyone else's fingerprints. The first night I slept there, the silence felt honest instead of empty. Life started breaking into new patterns. Work stayed steady, and for once, steady was enough. I stopped volunteering for extra shifts. Stopped burying myself in breach data just to tune out the noise in my head. I clocked out on time. Took long walks after dinner. Let myself exist in the quiet without trying to fill it. Friends reached out slowly, guys I drifted from because marriage has a way of eating time without asking. We met for beers, hiked on weekends, talked about the things men talk about when they don't want pity but don't want to lie either. They didn't prod. They didn't offer hollow advice. They just showed up. Hannah tried reaching out a few more times. Messages about wanting to apologize again. Messages about things she wished she had said. Messages about hoping I was okay. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, out of closure. Blake found me once at a coffee shop. I saw him walking toward me with the stiff posture of a man preparing to swallow his pride. He started into an apology, voice shaky, eyes low, hands twisting like he wasn't sure what to do with them. I'm sorry, man. I didn't handle anything right. I held his gaze for a long second. You weren't the one married to me, I said. Then I walked past him. That was all he got. Catherine tried too. Sent another apology, longer this time, something about guilt and regret and wishing she told me sooner. I read it once, archived it, and blocked her number. Not to punish her, just to cut the last frayed thread. The freedom that followed didn't show up in a rush. Came in fragments. In mornings where the coffee tasted like coffee again. On nights where sleep came without replaying old conversations. On weekends where the mountains felt like they did years ago. Open, grounding, real. I took up hiking again. Solo. The trails were quiet, the air thin, the sky wide enough to make everything else feel small. I'd climb until my legs burned, until my breath came in controlled gulps, until the noise of the past faded into something I could leave behind on the switchbacks. Somewhere in those months, between the paperwork, the solitude, the long drives, the steady rebuilding dignity returned. Not loudly, not all at once, just quietly in small pieces, until I could look in the mirror and see the man I was before betrayal tried to rewrite him. A man who didn't break. A man who didn't fold. A man who rebuilt on his own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. You never know you're healed until the past steps in front of you. And when it did, I felt absolutely nothing. It happened on a Tuesday. No symbolism. No timing that made the moment poetic. I was grabbing groceries after work. Just the basics. Bread, eggs, coffee. The kind of errand that doesn't register as anything. I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about her. My mind was on a server outage from earlier and whether I felt like cooking or ordering takeout. I turned down the cereal aisle and there she was. Hannah. She froze mid-reach, hand hovering over a box of granola like she'd forgotten how to move. Her hair was shorter, her posture smaller. Her eyes tired in a way I recognized instantly. She said my name, soft, unsure. Trevor. I nodded once. Hey. No warmth. No coldness. Just a polite acknowledgement. The same tone I'd use with a neighbor I barely knew. I didn't stop walking. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't give her anything to hold on to. Her face faltered, just a flicker, but enough to show she expected more. Maybe an opening. Maybe conversation. Maybe a chance to reopen what she'd burned down. But I kept moving, my cart rolling past her without slowing. Trevor, wait, can we? She started. I didn't. Not out of anger. Out of completion. I finished my shopping, checked out, walked to my car, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. And that's when it hit me. Not rage. Not sadness. Not some swell of old affection. Nothing. Just a deep, steady peace in the center of my chest. The kind of peace you don't notice until it replaces something heavier. For the first time since everything fell apart, I realized I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need answers. Didn't need apologies. I didn't need anything. I had my life back. My direction. My dignity. The windows were fogging slightly in the cold. People moved in and out of the store. The world kept turning, indifferent and honest. And I felt free. Driving home, it struck me how betrayal works. It doesn't define you. It wounds you, reshapes you, scars you, but it doesn't dictate who you become. How you rise afterward does. I pulled into my parking spot, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment staring at the city lights. She had thrown everything away. I hadn't. I'd rebuilt. Quietly, deliberately, on my own terms. And as I stepped out of the car, locking the door behind me, I understood something simple and solid. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't anger. It isn't a confrontation. It isn't proving anything to the person who broke you. Sometimes the strongest revenge is living well after they thought they ruined you. And that's exactly what I walked toward.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.